$292 million walked out of a DeFi protocol last Saturday. The attackers didn't break the code, they didn't find a smart contract bug, and they didn't compromise a private key. So what did happen? Well, they exploited a configuration setting, one number in the settings file, and that one number turned a targeted breach into a $13 billion cascade across the whole DeFi ecosystem. So today, we're going to walk through exactly how this happened to begin with, what liquid restaking actually is, what a cross-chain bridge actually is, and what a DVN is, so that by the end of today's video, you can look at any DeFi protocol and ask the 3 questions that would have prevented this entire thing. Hi, I'm Jess, and let's build this up from first principles. So let's start with the asset that got stolen, because if you understand RS-ETH, everything downstream makes sense. Staking is when you lock up your Ether to help secure the Ethereum network, and you earn yield for doing so. Liquid staking is a layer on top of that. You deposit Ether with a protocol like Lido, they stake it for you, and they hand you back a receipt token like STETH that represents your stake position. That receipt token is still liquid, meaning you can trade it or use it elsewhere while your underlying Ether keeps earning. Now, restaking takes this one step further. Eigenlayer lets you take that already staked Ether and pledge it a second time, and this time to secure other services like oracles, bridges, or data availability layers. The same capital earns yield from 2 places at once is what this means. So that's the pitch. Now, the third layer, liquid restaking. Protocols like Kelp DAO let you restake through Eigenlayer without giving up liquidity. So you deposit your Ether, Kelp stakes it, restakes it, and gives you back a token called RS-ETH. So that token represents your restaked position. You can still trade it, you can still lend it, you can post it as collateral, all while your underlying capital is earning triple stacked yield in the background. So RS-ETH is a receipt for a receipt for a receipt, if that makes sense. 3 layers deep. And when that RS-ETH lives on more than 20 different blockchains, which it does, it has to move between those chains somehow. And that movement happens through a cross-chain bridge, which brings us to the second concept you need to understand. That said, let us talk about what a cross-chain bridge actually does. Blockchains are islands, right? Ethereum doesn't know what happened on Arbitrum. Solana doesn't know necessarily what happened on Base. Each one is its own self-contained ledger. So when you want to move a token from one chain to another, you can't actually just literally move it. You lock it on the first chain and you mint a copy on the second chain. When you want to go back, you burn the copy and unlock the original. And that process needs a messenger, something that watches the first chain, sees your lock transaction, and tells the second chain, yes, this user really did lock their tokens. Go ahead and mint their copy. That messenger is the bridge. And Layer 0 is one of the largest cross-chain messaging systems in crypto. And the way Layer 0 works is that it doesn't verify messages itself. It lets each application choose who verifies the messages for them. Those verifiers are also called DVNs, which stands for Decentralized Verifier Networks. And here's the design. When a cross-chain message gets sent, one or more DVNs watch the source chain, see the transaction, and submit a cryptographic attestation to the destination chain saying this message is real. And once enough DVNs agree, the bridge releases the funds. And here's the critical part. Every application picks its own DVN configuration. You can use 1 DVN, you can use 3 DVNs and require all 3 to agree. You can use 5 DVNs and require any 3 of the 5 to agree. And Layer 0 calls this their X of Y of N security model. It's the most flexible cross-chain security design in the space. Their flexibility is a feature, but it's also, when misused, the vulnerability, their weakest link. So now that we have a general understanding of how things were working behind the scenes, let's go through the attack step by step. When Kelp DAO had chosen a one-of-one DVN configuration, a single verifier, a single signer set, that one entity was the only thing standing between someone forging a cross-chain message and the bridge releasing the funds. Layer 0 had publicly recommended multi-verifier setups. Their integration guidance warns that single DVN configurations create a single point of failure, but Kelp kept theirs anyway. Now, here's how the attack actually worked. And this is the part that matters for understanding DeFi's risk in general. DVNs don't float in the cloud. They run on infrastructure. Specifically, they rely on RPC nodes, which are remote procedure call servers, to read the state of the source blockchain. An RPC node is just a computer that maintains a copy of the chain and answers questions like what happened at block number 15 million, for instance. Your MetaMask wallet uses RPC nodes. Every DeFi app actually uses RPC nodes. They're the backbone of blockchain infrastructure, the part nobody looks at until it breaks. Fast forward in time, the Lazarus Group, North Korea's state-sponsored cybercrime unit, figured out which specific RPC nodes Layer 0's DVN was reading from. They compromised 2 of them. They swapped the legitimate software on those machines for malicious versions that would lie about what was happening on the source chain. Then they launched a denial of service attack, a flood of traffic designed to take servers offline against the clean, uncompromised RPC nodes. Those nodes crashed under the load. The DVN had nowhere to turn except the poisoned nodes, because that's how failover works. When primary infrastructure fails, the system automatically falls back to secondary sources. So, once the DVN was reading exclusively from the compromised nodes, the attackers submitted a forged message, and the poisoned nodes confirmed it as legitimate. The DVN attested to it, and because Kelp's bridge only needed that single DVN's attestation, it released the funds. So, 116,500 RS ETH, about $292 million, just vanished. And here's where a targeted theft became a systemic event, a domino effect. Because before Kelp could freeze anything, the attackers took the stolen RSETH and deposited it into Aave as collateral. Then they borrowed wrapped Ether against it and took off. So now let us stop and think about what this actually means, because it's the concept every DeFi user should understand. Aave is a lending protocol. You deposit an asset as collateral, and you can borrow another asset against it. Sounds pretty cool. I've used it. And just as an example, if I deposit, say, $100 of ETH, I might be able to borrow $70 of stablecoins. That's a loan to value ratio. The collateral has to be worth more than the loan. Otherwise, Aave has a problem. That said, here's the problem Aave had. The stolen RSETH lost its backing the moment the bridge was drained. The token existed, but there was no underlying Ether behind it anymore. It was paper. But Aave's price feed, what we call an oracle, which is just the source that tells the protocol what things are worth, hadn't caught up to it yet. The oracle still priced RSETH at full value. So the attacker deposited paper, borrowed real Ether against it, and disappeared. And that left Aave with roughly $196 million in what's called bad debt, which are essentially loans that can never be repaid because the collateral backing them is worthless. Now, here's where DeFi psychology takes over. Aave had dozens of different markets, and only one of them had this exposure. The smart contracts weren't broken. The protocol's architecture was intact. They weren't hacked. But depositors didn't wait to read the details. They saw Aave, right, in the headlines, and bad debt in the same headline, and they ran. That said, Aave's total value locked fell from $26.4 billion to about $18 billion in 48 hours. That's more than $6 billion, leaving a protocol whose actual loss was $196 million. And across all of DeFi, total value locked dropped roughly $13 billion. So this is essentially a bank run that happened. The exact same dynamic, okay, or situation that takes down or has taken down traditional banks played out in smart contracts. And the trigger was a configuration setting on a bridge a lot of those depositors had never even heard of. So what's the lesson here, you might ask? If you're a DeFi user, not a developer, not a protocol designer, just someone using these tools, there are 3 questions this attack tells you to ask before you put money anywhere. Question 1, what bridge does this protocol depend on? And what's the verifier configuration? If a protocol issues a token that lives on multiple chains, there's a bridge in the middle. That's what it tells you. So you need to ask how many DVNs, how many signers, how many independent entities would have to be compromised, right, hacked or tricked simultaneously at the same time for that bridge to fail. If they have just one, that's a red flag. 3 or more, ideally with diverse verification methods like a mix of multi-sig, zero-knowledge proofs, and or third-party oracles. And let me know if you have any questions on any of these different methods that I just listed out. If the protocol you're looking to use has a mix of any of these that I just listed out, then it's a better setup, it's smarter, it's wiser. Question 2 you should be asking yourself is, what's the oracle source and how quickly does it update? The Aave side of this only cascaded because the price feed didn't reflect reality fast enough. Every lending protocol you use has an oracle. Every perpetual futures exchange has an oracle. So ask whether it's Chainlink or a custom oracle or a single centralized feed, and ask whether there's a delay mechanism that catches sudden depegs before they become bad debt and it cascades out of control. And question number 3, what happens when things go wrong? Arbitrum's Security Council voted 9-3 to freeze $71 million of the stolen Ether. That was good for Kelp users. It also means Arbitrum has an off switch. That's a trade-off. A protocol with no emergency powers can't freeze your funds, but it also can't save them. A protocol with emergency powers can save them, but those same powers could theoretically be used against you. Neither is wrong. You just have to know which one you're using and know the trade-offs. And most importantly, above all, I would say the golden rule here is always and forever, never have any assets on any protocol period, any exchange, any lending protocol that you're earning yield, whatever, doesn't matter. Never have any money on any protocol that you are not willing to part with, okay? So you transact quickly, that's what I do. Take your money off, you move it, okay, offline. Anyway, aside from this golden rule that I just mentioned, the 3 questions I laid out on the bridge trust model, on the oracle design, and the emergency powers the protocol you're using have, you need to ask those before you deposit. And if you do, and you cross your T's, you've just avoided and can avoid the category of risk that took down $13 billion in TVL this weekend. That said, before we close out, I want to call your attention to key events happening this week. We know that the US-Iran ceasefire expires tomorrow, which could hit risk assets hard if talks collapse. And then we have Kevin Warsh's Fed chair confirmation hearing happening in Washington today. So I will talk about this and get you up to date on all implications in tomorrow's show. So if you haven't subscribed yet, I would encourage you to do this. It is very encouraging considering the work that goes into every single video and considering the fact we're still in a bit of a bearish side trend. So I come to you every day because I want you to stay up to date with what's happening. Anyway, that's a wrap for today's video. Let me know if you had any questions on what I explained on a technical side. I do my best to break it down in the most understandable way possible. And I always think there's a lesson, there is a silver lining in everything that happens, even when it's negative, because if anything, we can learn how to protect ourselves from having that happen again. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you guys here tomorrow. Take care.